"5:19 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. 5:19 Dozens of Commons staff waiving their anonymity to call for action against bullying. Jessica Elgot More than 80 current and former members of House of Commons staff, as well as MPs and journalists, have signed an extraordinary open letter, waiving their anonymity, to call for action against bullying and harassment. The joint letter to the House of Commons Commission has been organized by women who gave evidence to Dame Laura Cox's inquiry into bullying and sexual harassment in Parliament, which was published last week with a damning verdict on the conduct of some staff and MPs, as well as the failure of senior leaders to tackle the issue. The signatories of this letter have one thing in common. We have personally experienced, or seen firsthand, bullying or harassment by members of Parliament go unchallenged, the letter says. Dame Laura Cox's report has exposed Westminster's open secret. A minority of parliamentarians have been allowed to get away with this behaviour for years. Among the signatories are the MPs Jess Phillips, Sarah Wollaston, Lisa Nandy, John Mann and Kevin Barron, who chairs the Common Standards Committee. Cox's report found that women were the target of jokes by gangs of boorish male MPs who made lewd comments and sexual gestures and made them answer offensive and humiliating questions about their sex lives, she found. The House of Commons Commission will meet this week to discuss the Cox report, a body usually chaired by the Speaker, Jen Bercow, who is himself at the center of bullying claims, which he denies. A spokeswoman for the Speaker said that he would stand aside from chairing the meeting on Wednesday, in the spirit of independence, and the meeting will be led by Jane McCall, the most senior independent member of the Commission. Updated at 5:26 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. 5:14 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. 5:14 Boris Johnson says we must not turn a blind eye to Khashoggi murder. Former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has said Britain should refuse to turn a blind eye to the murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi and pressure Saudi Arabia into ending the brutal civil war in Yemen. Photographed while Oliver EPA Johnson compared the Istanbul killing with the Novichok attack in Salisbury in March, calling them state-sponsored plots designed to send a terrifying public warning to opponents. His comments in the Telegraph came as one of his predecessors as Foreign Secretary, Jack Straw, said, "The scales now have to fall from our eyes, and firm action is needed to reduce the destabilizing power of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman." The Gulf Kingdom admitted on Friday that Washington Post columnist Khashoggi, a vocal critic of Riyadh, was killed at its Istanbul consulate but claimed he died after a fight broke out. Johnson said, "We cannot just let it pass, and, while the UK has crucial trade and security links with the Gulf state, the UK and the US must lead other countries in holding Saudi Arabia properly to account." Updated at 5:21 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. 4:42 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. 4:42 Key events of the morning so far. Theresa May will tell the Commons today that 95% of the Brexit withdrawal agreement and its protocols are settled as she seeks to demonstrate to anxious MPs in her own party that she is making headway in the increasingly fraught divorce talks. A senior Labour MP has called on Conservative whips to identify party colleagues who use vile and dehumanising language towards Theresa May, after a weekend during which there were suggestions the Prime Minister should be knifed and hanged. The Secretary of State for Transport, Chris Grayling, has said now is the time for calm level heads to get through the last Brexit negotiation. Grayling also said he would be willing to accept a short bridge backstop if Brexit negotiations were not complete by next March. Dozens of current and former members of staff at the House of Commons are demanding changes in how bullying is dealt with. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry, defended her decision, along with the rest of Labour's front bench, not to attend the People's Vote march in London on Saturday calling for a second EU referendum. The former Foreign Secretary Jack Straw called on the UK government to recall its ambassador to Saudi Arabia, and end arms sales to the country after the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Updated at 5:13 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 4:40 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 4:40 this weekend. Hundreds of thousands marched in London, calling for a second Brexit referendum. Peter Tatchell, a British human rights campaigner, said protesting was a means to an end, not an end in itself. It puts the authorities under pressure for change and creates sense of social solidarity. Coming together in huge numbers makes people feel they are not alone, he said, speaking on the BBC Today programme. Campaigners for a second Brexit referendum are hoping to harness the energy demonstrated by Saturday's 700,000-strong march in London to lobby MPs in the run-up to a crucial Commons vote. The People's Vote group will focus on 50 Conservative MPs, including 5 ministers, who they believe could be persuaded to vote for a second referendum should Theresa May's final Brexit deal be voted down. Updated at 5:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 4:24 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 4:24 Emily Thornberry defends decision not to attend People's Vote march. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry, defended her decision, along with the rest of Labour's frontbench, not to attend this People's Vote march in London on Saturday, calling for a second EU referendum. She told the BBC Radio 1 Today programme that she had instead been in Crawley in West Sussex, where 58% of the population voted to leave the EU, talking to activists and businesses. I want to have a people's vote, but I want to have a big and proper people's vote, which is a general election, she said, although Theresa May says today she has got 95% of the agreement done with the European Union. I don't know if that's really the right number, but I can tell you what the bit she has got to agree yet is extremely difficult. Updated at 4:33 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 4:19 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 4:19 Patrick Wintour, the former Foreign Secretary Jack Straw, called on the UK government to recall its ambassador to Saudi Arabia, and end arms sales to the country after the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. He said it should now be the British objective to weaken the authority of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and that the Crown Prince had become an architect of impending instability in the Middle East. Straw challenged the Saudi claim that the Crown Prince knew nothing of the operation to kill Jamal Khashoggi, a well-known journalist and critic of the Saudi government, arguing, nothing of significance happens in Saudi Arabia without his knowledge. Straw was Foreign Secretary between 2001 and 2006, and since leaving office has been a strong supporter of rapprochement with Iran, Saudi's great antagonist in the Middle East. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry, repeated her call for an end to arms sales to Saudi Arabia, a statement she has made many times before, in protest at the Saudi conduct of the war in Yemen. She said, "These are our bombs. These are our planes they're using." In response to the Saudi admission of killing Khashoggi, she accused the government ministers of simply wringing their hands and saying, "Isn't this awful?" She said Saudi behavior was unacceptable and it was necessary for its leadership to change their ways. Updated at 4:26 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:58 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:58 Transport Secretary willing to accept a short bridge backstop to complete Brexit. Updated at 4 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:45 Transport Secretary calls for calm level heads. The Secretary of State for Transport, Chris Grayling, has said now is the time for calm level heads to get through the last Brexit negotiation. He warned that MPs seeking a vote of confidence in Prime Minister Theresa May risk seeing Britain leave the EU without a deal. The Brexiteer, who ran Mrs May's leadership campaign in 2016, appealed for calm as opponents of May ramped up their threats to remove her from office if she does not alter course on Brexit. Speaking on the BBC Radio 4 Today programme, he said this was always going to be the most difficult part of the negotiation. If the deal on offer cannot get through Parliament, there will be no deal. So it is in everyone's interest to get a deal both sides accept. That's why, for example, the idea of a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK is not a stater. "There is no way we could agree to that." Grayling added that if a short bridge was required between the implementation period, he would be happy to contemplate that. Updated at 3:52 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:28 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:28. Cooper criticizes violent, dehumanizing language used about May. That violent, dehumanizing language used about Theresa May by anonymous Tory MPs has been criticized by Labour's Yvette Cooper, who said those using such vernacular should be outed. The Labour former minister criticised violent words used by the Prime Minister's opponents at the weekend, which included suggesting she would be knifed in the front and should bring her own noose to a Wednesday meeting with backbenchers. Speaking on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, Cooper said that such language normalised violence at a time when female MPs were facing increasing hostility and little more than 2 years after Jo Cox was brutally murdered in the street. This violent, dehumanizing language towards a woman MP, towards a Prime Minister who, no matter how much you might disagree with her, is someone who is doing a job in public life, she said. Nobody should be subject to that kind of violent language, which I think is normalizing violence in public debate at a time when we lost Jo Cox. We have had threats against Rosie Cooper. We have had other violent death threats against women MPs. Brexiteer Mark Francois said the language was unacceptable, but that he would not tell the Chief Whip, Julian Smith, how to do his job. He had out at a bunker mentality in Downing Street, telling Today, "The problem is that there is a lot of frustration on the backbenches at the moment, both among Leavers and Remainers, at the general state of play." Updated at 3:31 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:27 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 3:27. Welcome to the Politics Live blog. Hello, this is Shara Marsh standing in for Andrew Sparrow today, and following the politics of the day. On Sunday, Tory MP Johnny Mercer said he could not continue to support an administration that cannot function on issues from Brexit to the Grenfell Tower disaster and the Windrush scandal. He spoke out as numerous Conservative politicians said May was on course to face a vote of no confidence this week as all wings of the party united against her. Reports include threats about how May is entering the killing zone, with assassination in the air. The Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, urged the plotters to ignore the jitters and hold their nerve for a Brexit deal. Raab laughed off the lurid claims about a killing field, pointing out that May's future is regularly gossiped about with little action from her political enemies. The violent rhetoric triggered criticism, with the former Northern Ireland Secretary, Theresa Villiers, branding it disturbing. The SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, warned the Tory rivals to get a grip. Updated at 3:34 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time.